Witam wszystkich bardzo serdecznie. Za chwilę rozpoczniemy spotkanie z twórcami filmu Lili. Ten film jest pokazywany w ramach takiej sekcji opowieści ze świata, Świat, kobiet, a są z nami Peter Hegedus, director of the movie. Hello, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Thanks for having us.
And Rebecca McElroy, co-producer of Lili. Hello.
Hello.
So thank you for accepting this invitation to this, unusual online edition of Krakow Film Festival. It's really great that we can watch your movie during the festival. And can you tell us, how are you today? How is the coronavirus situation in Australia right now? Are you stuck at home or not anymore?
Yes, we are very much. Well, we're stuck at home. We were able to visit people, but I think it's up to only 5 people can visit one household. Is that right, Beck?
Yes, we're probably luckier than most people in the world in Australia, because it hasn't been too, it's not good, but it's compared to other places, we're very lucky, and they're starting to lift a little bit the restrictions for us. But yeah, as Peter said, it's still quite limited with what we can do, but we're starting to have a little bit more freedom.
I would like to put some light on the story of Lili, and so maybe let's start simple. How did it all start? How did you meet Lili? Who came up with this idea of this film?
Yes, so I have a friend very good friend in Brisbane. His name is Zoltán Blodc. He's also a fellow Hungarian filmmaker, and we made a film together back in 2016, actually, and we wanted to work together again. And he said to me, "You must meet this old lady. She has an amazing story." And I said, "Oh, I'm too busy. I don't want to do another Hungarian film." By that stage, I've made 4 feature documentaries related to Hungary. Anyway, I said, I don't want to. Then I went to see her, and turns out that I met her 15 years earlier when she interviewed me about my first documentary, which was my first television documentary that I made about my grandfather, who was the Prime Minister of Hungary in 1956, at the time of the Hungarian Revolution, which, by the way, was premiered at Krakow Film Festival in 2000. And that was my first film festival experience, actually, in Krakow Film Festival. And so anyway, going back to Lili, we sat down and she basically told me her life story in literally 16 minutes. You can imagine for an 81-year-old, would be quite a long process, but for her, she went through it, but she managed to mention some key moments in her life. It's so traumatic that for an average person, be like, my God, you lived through that? And so when I heard all these stories, I just had this gut feeling that we've got to do something. We've got to tell this story somehow, and the journey began there. Of course, it was just like planting a seed, and it started growing and becoming bigger and bigger. And it became quite complicated in what all the information that was coming in, and of course that's how Beck got involved as well, and worked together to tell this story, because it's such a complicated story.
Yeah, it's. Did you discover the story, step by step with Eddie's daughter, together, or you knew the story before you started filming?
It was a gradual process. So when I met Lili, the old lady, she told me about what happened to her when she was a young woman, the young girl, that she witnessed the massacre of Jewish people, and how her mother was severely beaten. And so those stories she told me, she didn't want to talk about her leaving her daughter in Hungary. She kind of like just rushed through that. She said, we left Hungary. We had to leave Hungary. It was the revolution, because of the revolution. And we got on a train and then we left. And I said, what about your daughter? Oh, yes, I left my daughter in Hungary. You know, and it was this kind of, you know, I realized then also that this is something that's very painful for her to talk about. And so I knew that there could or potentially be an opportunity to go deeper. Yeah. But it's so many things in the air, you know, so many balls in the air. And that's why it's so important to have the right people around me who can guide me to tell the story, because I'm a filmmaker who likes to surround himself with great minds.
Yeah. Becca, would you like to add something to this?
Well, I think, I would compliment Peter on being perceptive about all the little elements of Lili. There are so many elements to this character, and she's lived a full life, and it was a really interesting project to be involved in, because I think often when, as documentary makers, we look at a whole life and we pick elements to tell that story. And I feel like this was we really tried to tell the whole story in this film, and with all the challenges that brought about it. I think that's what I find so interesting about the film and the journey of making it, was trying to go down all those little alleyways of Lili's life, to kind of come out at the end and go, this is not a Hollywood happy ending, but this is what life is. And we've tried to actually share a whole life with all its complexities and pits and troughs, and, you know, and truths and untruths and all the things that, yeah. So it was a fascinating project to be involved in, and Peter was it was a journey for Peter too, I think, to be on, because they kept throwing things into it, and, you know, and suddenly you're off to Canada.
Yeah. I was thinking about it, like how this work looked like, because it's like, as I said, there are so many layers and so many turning points in this story. So I was thinking if there was also, like, are those turning points were also a surprise for you, or you knew this story before?
Well, as I said, I knew what I did know after my first meeting with Lili is that she witnessed a massacre, and then her mother was severely beaten, and then she left her daughter. But I didn't know much more than that. And so once I got to know Edie, then she told me, it just came out. It's like, it was just part of a conversation. It wasn't like, Peter, I want to tell you that I didn't raise my child. It wasn't like that. It was just came out over dinner, like, oh yes, I didn't spend time with my kid as I got sick. And then she then changed the subject. But that information was, I still remember it now. Zoli, the cinematographer, and myself were there for dinner, and it just came out. And I knew then that, my God, there's another layer here, you know, that nobody's talking about. And the challenge was to create the space for Edie to talk about this kind of really painful thing, because obviously, you know, people don't like leaving their kids. It's not they don't do this for fun. It's painful. And so, you know, we needed to make sure that the people that we're telling the story about, they feel safe to share these very painful secrets.
And was it easy to, you know, encourage them to tell this story? Because I believe that maybe in a first, maybe Lili was, you know, okay with telling the story about the past, about war times, about their parents. But for me, this, you know, this story about this female line in their family, it's so, you know, emotional. It's so touching. Was it easy to to take this story from them, or they said, oh no, maybe this is not important, we don't want to talk about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, maybe Beck can add to this as well, because Beck was very much involved in the post-production process, and that is where documentary films get made, really, in the edit suite. But certainly during the production phase, Edie was the one who I felt like she wanted to find things out. She was also reluctant, just like all the other members of the family, but she really led the way in saying, Mom, we need to ask these questions. We need to find these, because as she says in the film, Mom, when you go, who will I talk to about these important things? And so she was the person who wanted change. But and what I noticed actually is that for example, when old Lili saw Edie wanting to find the truth, she felt inspired to also ask questions, and she went along the journey. So I think within the family, they somehow supported one another. It's almost like running a marathon or something, and they have to take the bat. They seem to have supported each other in certain stages, because they knew that it was important for one another. And Judith, of course, was an important part of this process as well, because she, out of all of them, I would say, is the one who faced these things, who worked very hard and very consciously to understand why things are the way they are. And maybe she was also in a much easier position compared to her grandmother, who witnessed the massacre and went through a revolution. So yes, it was all about working with the family members, and for them to see what the others were doing. So yeah, but Beck may want to comment on that.
Yeah, I suppose I would add that I think like in any film, you have to sometimes take people carefully to places they mightn't want to go to, so that they do reveal some deeper truths. And I think Peter did that really beautifully and over a long period of time, and has stayed connected to that family, as he always will, because of the relationship they had to form for him to tell this story. And I think what is gratifying for us is that the family have said, sort of as a whole, that they are glad that it was difficult, and it's still difficult for them. It's not like, happy viewing for the family, but that they have all, I think, indicated that they are glad they did this, and that they have added something to the discourse around family trauma and the history of Hungary, and more broad, and that idea around the relationships and motherhood and difficulty and tragedy and intergenerational trauma. All those things they've added to that conversation, and they are we've thanked them for that. But I feel that they are also happy that they did put themselves through this and contribute. And it's, as Lili says at the end of the film, it's speaking the truth, owning that truth is sort of like a relief, and it was worth it, and it does add to the conversation.
So was it difficult for you, like emotionally, to maybe to look at this story from a distance, but also with the care? Was it difficult for you?
Oh, yeah, well, it was very difficult, yes. And I have a complicated family history myself, so I think that is why I felt somewhat comfortable being in this complexity. And I think they understood that, and they felt comfortable talking to me about it. Of course, when Edie expressed herself about her daughter and the pain she felt, I felt that as well. And I think when she saw that, I remember actually the first interview I did with Edie, I got quite emotional when she opened up. And to her, she spoke to me about afterwards. She said it was a very important thing that she saw that I was touched by what she was saying. Like I wasn't just going, I actually felt. I felt it. I mean, that's the way I make films. I emotionally kind of invest myself in the stories because I feel like because if they're going to give something to me, I need to give something to them. You know, it's the idea of taking just makes me very uncomfortable. And so that was something that I did. And I think perhaps because I'm so involved in it in the process, sometimes it makes my job a little bit more complicated because, in the editing process, I make this, I care about my characters a lot more and yeah, it's difficult. And we had so many difficult decisions to make in the edit. Beck and I, we cut the film in Hungary and Australia, and we had two editors, very good editors, by the way, Judy, from Australia, and Agi Mogor from Hungary. But Beck came to Hungary, and we had a very intensive 2 weeks, in Budapest, where we worked very hard to tell the story in a way that's not going to hurt the people, but at the same time does show the painful truth. It's such a fine balance.
Yeah, I think you've got to be quite sure that you have the person's integrity is always at the heart of the story. It's you of course, it's a fine line between exploitation and truth, and that's where that relationship is. I think the relationship between a documentary maker and their subject is kind of one of the most unique. You describe it. It's like it's like a friendship of 20 years created in months, and it's like a confessional. It's that you get, and you owe that person. They've given you something, and I think Peter treats his subjects with great care, and is aware of the responsibility he carries in telling that story, and having been given that information, and having that and sharing that story.
And what was maybe it will sound weird, this question, but as I said, there are so many layers in this story, and I wonder which layer is more important to you, which part of the story is most important for you, Peter?
Well, look, it's a difficult question. I mean, it's a good question, but it's a difficult one to answer because I think the traumas, the stories that they're all good stories. You see, they're all good and valid in their own right, and weighty and painful in their own right. And so, from a story point of view, I think for me the two core traumas in this film and stories is what happened at the train station, and what happened at the police stations a few years later. To me, that those two stories are the ones that I guess spoke to me quite emotionally, and I wanted to really find the right place for them in the film, and they're the ones that kind of, in my opinion, kind of drove everything else that happened afterwards. Because I believe the fact that we're here today is a consequence of all the things that happened before us, and I think those two events that happened in Lili's life had certainly had a tremendous impact on everyone involved, and so we kind of use those two events as the foundation of whatever happened afterwards. But yes, I mean, I guess that's the answer.
Yeah, I think it's interesting though, in the journey to tell the story, there was because I think what was really good was that was what we decided, and Peter decided, was that the heart of this, because there was a lot of debate about whether the leaving young Lili was the moment, and we did spend a lot of time deciding what it was, what was going to be, what we were going to try and, as you say, sort of with all the different stories, sort of perhaps pin this around. And I think that it was I think the decision to say, let's go right back to what shaped Lili, so that these other events, not of course were inevitable, but there is a way to make a kind of connection in that sort of the trauma, the intergenerational trauma, that the breaking of the bond of the mother in such a horrific way for Lili, she carries that for the rest of her life, and that potentially has had an impact on everything that happens after, which I think that's where there was some really interesting conversations around that, and I think I totally agree with Peter that going right back to that was why that is where it is in the film.
Mm. Yeah, it's for me it's this question, if you in the psychology, if you can can you inherit trauma? And we were talking a lot about it, especially after war, because yeah, it's horrible, but it works like this, that trauma goes through all generations after. It's really difficult to cut this horrible events, and maybe this film will help to cut this line, to break this line. I had a feeling that Eddie was so determined to collect all the puzzles, because maybe it will help her to break this troubled female line, as she said in the movie. Did you talk about it with her? Why she's so determined to collect all the family, to collect all puzzles of the story?
Her answer was always that I don't know, that the past for her is very fragmented, that her mother has not shared all the truth about the past and all the events, and she just wanted to collect facts. This was always her saying. She wants to collect facts, wants to kind of put the past in the right kind of order, but with Idiot, like with some of the with her mother as well, there's still a lot of pain. It's a lot of pain, and we cannot expect a film to solve all these problems, but perhaps, as you said, it can help. And I think I like to think that this film can contribute to some sort of positive change in the family. And I was just thinking about this last night. I wonder, when Judith's daughter grows up, when she watches this film, what will she make of it? So I think the film has a strong role, long term. And I always said that, I think when 20 years ago, when I made my film about my grandfather in Krakow, the same question came up was, you think what have you achieved with the film? And the thing is that, it's something that accomplishments don't come immediately. It's something you do in life that it will take time. It's a healing process, and certainly, that's what we hope for this as well.
Fortunately, we have to finish our conversation. But thank you very much for this film and for this meeting. Did they watch the film already, like Lili, Eddie, and what about the family in Hungary?
Yeah, they did. They watched the film, and we had a wonderful time with them watching it. And they watched it when it was finished, and then Lili came to the film festival in Brisbane to watch it, and then
for the premiere.
The premiere in Brisbane. Yeah, it was very nice. Wasn't it? Beck was sitting with her.
Standing ovation, a well-deserved standing ovation, and she really enjoyed it.
I'm not surprised. You all deserve it. And young Lili, no, you don't have any contact with young Lili?
No, we don't. This is another thing. It's a bit, yeah. She's decided to distance herself from her family, and I guess from the film as well. And hopefully that will change. But we'll see what happens.